Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. Happy Oscar Nominations Day to all who celebrate. My great colleagues, led by Brent Lang and Clayton Davis, have been at it for hours, analyzing this year's contenders and what it all means. Go to Variety.com for all the news and analysis and reactions you need to know to understand the race as Film Award season heads into the home stretch. And check out Daily Variety's sibling podcast, Awards Circuit, for more analysis and roundtable discussion on Friday. In today's episode of Daily Variety, we'll get an update from Variety's Todd Spangler on where the Netflix deal to buy Warner Brothers Discovery stands and what Netflix's Q4 2025 earnings report tells us about the business momentum at the big N. But before we get to that, here is the only non-Oscar headlines that you need to know this morning. As Todd Spangler predicts in the conversation to come in a few minutes, Paramount Skydance did in fact extend its tender offer to buy Warner Brothers Discovery shares in its quest to pry the deal away from Netflix. The offer now runs through February 20. Warner Brothers Discovery says more than 90% of its holders have already rejected this overture. Paramount is also planning a proxy fight to offer shareholders an alternate slate of directors to vote for in its effort to sway the company away from Netflix. That process would happen around Warner Brothers Discovery's annual meeting, which is usually held in June. Warner Brothers Discovery has guided that it expects to hold a shareholder vote on the Netflix deal by April. That would make Paramount's proxy effort moot. But who knows what other maneuvers will be coming? You can follow it all by keeping watch on Variety.com and our social platforms. And now it's time for conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. Todd Spangler, Variety's business editor, gives us a look at where Netflix stands now as a business and its hopes for the WBD transaction. Todd Spangler, thanks for joining me.
Hello, hello.
It has been a week of hard labor on the business beat. There has been no shortage of news. Netflix kicked off Q4 2025 earnings season with its report on Tuesday. Let's start there, Todd. How do you assess the state of the business, the overall momentum based on the numbers that they released?
Yeah, the results were essentially in line with what analysts were expecting. You know, it was a slight beat on revenue and earnings, but I think investors were kind of thrown for a loop. I mean, this was expected too, but they came back that morning on Tuesday morning and said, all right, we're going to change our deal for the Warner Brothers studios and streaming from cash and stock to all cash. So that means they're going to take on even more debt. And investors, I think, didn't really like that.
Yeah, they did not like that. I think that now that it's been a couple of months, we can see it's not just a 1 or 2 day kind of variation, but this stock has lost almost 30% since they announced that they were going to get married to Warner Brothers Discovery. Did you get any sense that of any kind of second thoughts?
No, Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters walked through different questions about how they reached the deal with Warner Brothers and, you know, what changed on their thinking on the theatrical front. Ted Sarandos basically said, yeah, when I was dismissing theater going as an obsolete, outmoded idea, we were not in the business. Now that we're buying Warner Brothers, we're really bullish on box office and we want to win the box office and we're going to keep movies in the theaters for 45 days. So a little bit of a pivot there, really.
I will completely admit that before December 5th, when they announced this, I was skeptical that Netflix's heart was really in the bidding, but boy, was I wrong. But since they announced that, the background guidance that we've been getting is we wouldn't buy this studio to dismantle one of its greatest strengths. And Warner Brothers, one of its greatest strengths, it's a big Hollywood studio. It can get a movie into 4,000 locations in the United States, and it can get a movie in theaters around the world. And that is truly an asset and a scarce resource in a world where studios are being consolidated. So just from a pure business standpoint, it does stand to reason. That conversation also made me realize that, Sarandos is like, he's got sharp elbows, and Netflix for most of its life has been the disruptor and the startup. So of course, he would have to throw out some sharp thoughts about the industry, some things that raised eyebrows about movie theaters as a means of bringing attention to how his company was doing things differently. So, very interesting to see the maturation of Netflix. It's hard to believe, but yes, next year, 2027, Netflix will in fact turn 30. It'll be 30 years since they started putting DVDs in red envelopes. So, not quite ready to run for president, but certainly maturing. And that it's a good reminder for us that the disruptor, the startup in success with longevity will then become the institutions. Very interesting. Of course, Ted has been out there talking. What was your read on Greg Peters, the co-CEO? Is a little bit more behind the scenes, but obviously an enormously influential figure there. Did you read anything from his comments about how he's feeling about this deal?
Nothing terribly new, but they both said, look, when we went into the talks with Warner Brothers Discovery, we were not buyers. Netflix has been doing just fine without a legacy studio. So what they both said was they went in, they looked under the hood, they got excited about this opportunity. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Maybe once or twice you get a chance to get a huge entertainment property this big. It came onto the market. They looked at it. They thought it was a great fit. It's complementary, and it's going to, help them continue to grow. And that's the other thing that investors are worried about, that Netflix may be plateauing maybe a little bit on their subscriber growth.
That's interesting. They announced that they'd hit 325 million global subscribers. Let's pause and say that's an eye-popping number. And you and I both remember that cold day in April of 2022 when they announced that for the first time their subscriber growth had retarded a little bit, and that was around 230, and we thought, okay, that's the ceiling, right? That's
Right.
the ceiling for global streamers. That day was a really pivotal point for other streamers. The rush to spend at all costs to get market share really started to ebb then when the marketplace figured, well, if Netflix is plateauing, but they have gotten there, what were the markets that drove that growth?
They did have growth in the US and Canada across all markets, really. But the aggregate number, call it 25 million gain for last year, that was well below the 41 million they added in 2024. So that was another kind of worrisome indicator that, hey, where is Netflix's growth going to come from? They also announced that they were going to increase content spending by about 10%. To 20 billion this year. And you look at all things together here, you need more content to drive more paid memberships and advertising their new business, which they see this as a virtual cycle that it will just help them keep on growing and have all parts of the business work in tandem.
I know this is hard to answer, but I wonder if Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters and others anticipated the level of fight that they would have to around this deal. Not only the jousting with Paramount Skydance, and its contention is that it's put more money on the table than the Netflix deal, and also just in the industry, and a lot of the very grave concern that this deal could have just massive ripple effects on the larger film ecosystem. Do you think they anticipated the level of fight across different constituencies that they have faced in the last going on 60 days?
Yeah, they surely anticipated a backlash, and specifically on the theatrical front, I think they were ready for that. They're used to getting attacked as devaluing entertainment and the entertainment industry. Even before the Warner Brothers deal, they were being accused of hurting the theatrical movie industry.
Even as they put huge budgets into movies like last year's Frankenstein's from major filmmakers like Guillermo del Toro, I think still in the creative community, there's a sense that there's a Netflix movie and then there's a theatrical movie.
Yeah, and Ted Sarandos has worked very hard to say, look, we were not in the theatrical film distribution business before. We are now. And to his credit, he said, look, Netflix has changed its mind and its strategy in the past. They once said, we're never going to do advertising. Well, lo and behold, they've done that. They once, waved people off the idea that they were going to acquire sports rights in any meaningful way. And they are now in business with Major League Baseball, the NFL, WWE, and more. So his point was essentially like they are the mainstream incumbent powerhouse in Hollywood.
To their credit, say head on, hey, we've evolved. We've said things at certain times, and then events and the marketplace carry us in another way. I'm thinking of the corollary in terms of the former Jeff Bewkes, CEO of Time Warner, which for decades was the parent company of HBO. He famously dismissed Netflix. The thought of Netflix rising to be a strong competitor is akin to the Albanian army taking over the world. He came to probably rue those words, and I'm sure Sarandos is somewhat regretting some of the proclamations about sports and advertising. But Ted Sarandos is truly an affable, he's an enthusiastic guy and a true fan, a true student of pop culture.
Yeah, he is.
Let me close by asking you the Paramount Skydance of it all. Do they still technically have a tender offer out there for shares? Do you have any read as to what's next from them?
Yeah, well, so their previous offer expired on the 21st, on Wednesday. So if they're going to stay in it, they're going to have to say we're going to extend the deadline for offer, which I think they'll do. The thing that would really change the equation is if they came back and offered more money. I don't see that happening right now, because if that were something they were prepared to do, they would have done it already. So I think they either to save face or because they really think they have a shot at persuading shareholders that they are the better suitor. I think they're going to continue this and play out the string as long as they can.
And I guess there's a Hail Mary shot that a judge in Delaware would say, yes, we have to put this Netflix Warner Brothers transaction on pause, but that surely does seem like a long shot.
It's definitely a long shot, yes.
I'm so curious. Reed Hastings, who was the founder and stepped down as chairman a few years ago, I'm so curious as to whether he's calling Ted and Greg every day and offering his counsel, or if he is just somewhere watching it all happen.
He's at his ski resort, I think, but he's still involved in the company. Apparently, he was not, Ted Sarandos said, he wasn't super gung-ho on them going after Warner Brothers, but he trusted them to go forward and make the best deal they could.
And my sense of him is he's a gracious enough person not to be going, I told you so, I told you so. But oh boy, there will be much written about all of this process, no doubt. Todd, as always, thank you for rising early and working hard to cover all this.
My pleasure. Good to talk to you.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. I'm recording this at LAX before I head off to Park City, Utah for the Sundance Film Festival. It's going to be a momentous one. Scripted TV is kicking back up again after a quiet period in December. 3 big shows will be rolling out next week. Disney Plus launches its latest from Marvel TV, Wonder Man, on January 27th. Season 3 of Shrinking drops January 28th on Apple TV, and Bridgerton fans will rejoice on January 29th when Part 1 of Season 4 arrives on Netflix. Before we go, congrats to Michael Hayerman and Sean Laughlin of Endemol Shine North America. Hayerman has been promoted to Executive Vice President of Unscripted Series, while Laughlin has been promoted to Executive VP of Unscripted Development. Endemol Shine North America is part of European powerhouse Banijay. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Todd Spangler. Stick, Snicks, Hick, Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in Monday for another episode of Daily Variety. And don't forget to tell us what you think at podcasts@variety.com. Thanks.